In the opening scenes, we see an accident on an oil rig somewhere in the middle of the sea. A girl named Hannah works at the production site. Unlike other workers, Hannah doesn't wear special protective headphones because she has hearing problems. During her break, Hannah eats alone without conversing with any of her colleagues. When someone approaches Hannah, she usually turns on her hearing aid. Today she was called into the manager's office. Hannah has been working at this company for 4 years and has been performing her duties well. However, according to the manager, there have been several complaints about her from other employees to the union committee. Hannah doesn't understand what the issue is. The manager assured that he doesn't intend to fire her. Over these 4 years, Hannah has never taken a sick day or vacation, which is why the manager wants her to take a month-long leave. Hannah wasn't used to resting, but the boss was very insistent. She left work feeling upset. No one is waiting for her at home. She lives alone in her modest apartment, which is immaculately tidy. Hannah is obsessed with order. Everything around her must be perfect. Later, Hannah called a certain woman but didn't say a word. The woman is outraged that Hannah hasn't responded to any of her letters. Usually, Hannah cooks the same meal for work, white rice with chicken and an apple. To pass the time, she spends her evenings embroidering. At night, Hannah couldn't sleep for a long time. The next morning, as her boss advised, she packed her things and prepared to go on vacation. The journey wasn't very long. When she got off the bus, Hannah hesitated but eventually threw her embroidery into the trash. After that, Hannah checked into a hotel. At some point in a burst of emotion, she started to turn the linens on the bed. During the day, Hannah walked along the seashore. In the evening, she went to a local restaurant for a bite to eat. A man at the adjacent table was discussing the oil rig accident on the phone. He was looking for a caregiver for an injured worker. It's a temporary solution until the worker can be moved out of there. Hannah, who had become a witness to this conversation, approached the man's table and stated that she is a nurse and could take on this job. On the way, Victor explained that they needed a caregiver for a few days. Once the injured worker gets better, they will remove him from there. The man also mentioned that several people had perished as a result of the accident. Soon Victor and Hannah boarded a helicopter that took them to the oil rig. They were greeted by Dimitri, who was in charge here. Later, Hannah revealed that she used to work as a nurse in the rehabilitation department. This was exactly what they needed because the patient, named Joseph, suffered multiple burns and damage to his corneas. He won't be able to see for about 2 weeks. Hannah was escorted to her room, which used to be Joseph's before he was moved to the infirmary. Now after the accident, the authorities plan to shut down the rig, so all the workers may be left without jobs. Finally, Hannah was escorted to the patient. Previously, she worked as a nurse, but not in this country. However, Hannah had no doubt that she could handle it. Alone in the room, Hannah unpacked her things. At some point, she noticed a photo of Joseph. Many of his belongings, including his mobile phone, were left in the room. Curiosity got the better of Hannah, and she listened to a voice message on Joseph's phone. A certain woman was expressing how much she missed him and asked him to call back. Hannah went to the patient, who had awakened and didn't recognize who was in front of him. Hannah explained that she was a nurse and here to take care of him. Joseph asked Hannah many questions, inquiring about her name, whether she had a boyfriend or husband and things like that. Hannah remained silent. She wasn't accustomed to talking much. Somehow, Joseph managed to guess that Hannah was a blonde. He also felt that the name Cora would suit her for some reason. Hannah continued to communicate with him solely on a professional level, not revealing any personal information. However, Joseph was very persistent. Hannah coldly replied that he could call her Cora. She also lied that she had red hair, before leaving. Interacting with Joseph stirred conflicting emotions in Hannah. In the ship's mess hall, she met Simon, the cook. Hannah had come only to collect dinner for Joseph, but Simon was too talkative. This was very tiresome for Hannah, and she was looking for an excuse to leave as soon as possible. Later, Hannah fed Joseph. When he asked Hannah what kind of food she preferred, Hannah said she liked chicken, white rice, and apples. This was the first personal information Hannah shared about herself. Joseph didn't believe that her name was Cora and that she was a redhead. Joseph was also surprised that the nurse liked such simple food. Typically, women enjoy chocolates and other sweets. As she left, Hannah sat down on the stairs and decided to taste Joseph's leftovers. She ate quickly and eagerly, as if she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. During the day, Hannah looked out to sea for a long time. Dimitri approached her, asking why she hadn't joined the others for dinner the previous night. Hannah simply replied that she wasn't hungry. Dimitri shared Hannah's sentiments. He didn't like to be disturbed either. At Hannah's request, he led her to the laundry room. According to Dimitri, everyone here in one way or another had escaped from society. The only exception might be Simon. Hannah continued to regularly care for Joseph. Despite the physical suffering, he hadn't lost his sense of humor and self-irony. Joseph asked Hannah to tell him something about herself. Hannah confessed that she was deaf. When she didn't want to hear something, she simply turned off her hearing aid. Hannah's deafness was not congenital, but she had no intention of revealing how it had happened. In turn, Joseph shared that he had recently read a book featuring a nurse named Cora as the main character. She had taken care of a young patient who eventually tragically passed away. That's why Joseph called the nurse Cora. Associative thinking kicked in. Later, Hannah approached Martin, an oceanographer. He measured the waves hitting the rig every hour. This research was crucial for improving their equipment. Like many others here, Martin wasn't very talkative. However, he was pleased with Hannah's interest. This time she joined the others for lunch. Hannah was greatly annoyed by her talkative colleagues. Some of them didn't like that Simon only cooked Italian food. Out of the blue, Hannah said that it was the most delicious food she had ever eaten. Those were her only words. Hannah became more open in her interactions with Joseph. It turned out he was 45 years old. Hannah didn't mention her own age. She couldn't hold back a smile when Joseph made another joke. It was a new experience for her to feel so comfortable around someone. Life on the oil rig went on as usual. Everyone had come to terms with the tragedy and continued to move forward. Hannah thought a lot about her patient. One day Simon personally brought lunch to Joseph. The cook noticed that Joseph was looking much better. It seemed he was recovering. Joseph was curious about what the nurse was like. Simon replied that she was silent and reserved. Simon advised his friend to pay attention to the nurse, as she was a single woman. After these words, Joseph asked Simon to leave. Liam, one of the rig workers, showed Hannah photos of his family. According to him, children are the greatest happiness. Hannah politely replied that it was probably true. She didn't share her own thoughts on the matter. During the day, there was a heavy downpour. Simon, as always, was working in the kitchen. He always tried to cook something special for his colleagues, but not everyone appreciated it. Hannah spent a long time in her room, and towards the evening, she came back to Joseph. He wasn't sleeping, waiting for her. Hannah asked Joseph to tell her something about himself. He asked if she could keep secrets and asked her to lean in. When Hannah leaned in, Joseph whispered that he couldn't swim. They both laughed for a long time. Hannah found it amusing, given where he worked. Joseph in turn shared that he had always dreamt of conquering the element of water since childhood but was always afraid. His father used to get angry about it and wanted to teach the son how to swim. So Joseph was thrown into the water, but he was never able to swim. Listening to Joseph's story, Hannah realized that it wasn't funny at all. Joseph's father couldn't swim himself, but despite that, he continued to get angry at his son. At Hannah's request, Dmitri contacted Dr. Sulitzer and handed the phone to the nurse. Hannah stated that the patient's condition was stable, but he wasn't getting better. Joseph still had a high temperature, so he needed to be taken to the hospital immediately. The doctor assured that they would take care of it in 2 days. The rig would be closing soon, but Dmitri wasn't looking for a new job. The company had many other rigs, so Dmitri was sure that he would be transferred to another place. For example, to Cuba or Chile. Dmitri was totally fine with that, because on land he was nervous. Hannah was curious about how the accident had happened. Dmitri said on that fateful day, they were drilling the seabed and encountered one of the gas voids. Joseph tried to save his colleague, but everything happened too quickly. The same man went willingly to his own demise because he was in a deep depression. Neither Dmitri nor the others reported this to the authorities. Let everyone believe that the man had perished in an accident. That way his family would at least get insurance money. Hannah began to interact more closely with Simon, no longer feeling uncomfortable. She found life away from civilization to her liking. Now, Hannah enjoyed the company of Joseph. He had never talked about the accident, but now Hannah knew for sure that he had been willing to sacrifice himself to save another person. One day Joseph mentioned a certain woman who was very dear to him. They loved each other, but the problem was that she was someone else's wife. Joseph said that there were certain things one shouldn't do, like falling in love with your best friend's wife. Now Joseph had to live with the consequences of his recklessness. Hannah seemed to respond to this with understanding. She believed that everyone should just move on, no matter what happened. At that moment, Hannah couldn't hold back her tears. She told Joseph that a helicopter would be coming for him tomorrow or the day after. Joseph just hoped that the nurse would fly with him. Hannah didn't know what to say. In the evening, the rig workers had a small party. Sometimes, everyone needed to relax to avoid going crazy. Hannah didn't join the fun, neither did Martin. Both preferred to stay on the sidelines. Martin was determined to get the rig closed down and use it for researching ocean waters. He had a goal, to put an end to ocean pollution. Hannah didn't know that people like Martin still existed. She wished him luck. In Hannah's room, the picture of Joseph with the best friend and his wife still hangs on the wall. There are also many unopened letters here. Taking Joseph's phone, Hannah called, but there was no answer. Hannah and Joseph grew closer and closer. Trust had developed between them, and they became something more to each other than just a nurse and a patient. Finally, Hannah shared her own story. Many years ago, she attended nursing school and was friends with a classmate who was very cheerful. Hannah was very proud to be her friend. In their home country, there was a war. The two friends decided to return home together at their own risk to find their families. Nothing happened on the road. They only saw fires in the distance. But when they were just 2 miles away from the city, soldiers stopped them. They spoke Hannah's language, but they captured her and her friend anyway. Those days were a nightmare for Hannah. There were 15 women there, including Hannah and her friend. Most of them didn't survive, including Hannah's friend. Remembering this, Hannah cried. Joseph couldn't hold back his tears either. He had no idea what trials Hannah had gone through in her youth. Joseph wanted to console her in some way, but Hannah continued to cry. She had never been so open with anyone before. The scars would stay with her for life. The next day, Joseph was transported to the hospital by helicopter. Of course, Hannah was with him. When the helicopter landed, Joseph was loaded into an ambulance. Joseph screamed, calling for Hannah, but she had no choice but to leave. Joseph was placed in the intensive care unit and underwent emergency surgery to restore his vision. Meanwhile, Hannah's life returned to its usual routine. Just like before, she worked in production. After some time, Joseph was discharged from the hospital. He still walked with a crutch and had a limp. Now, Hannah no longer had white rice and chicken for lunch. Joseph was much better. His burns had healed. When he went for a checkup, some nurse said he had forgotten his backpack. It turned out to be Hannah's backpack. Joseph couldn't stop thinking about this remarkable woman. Once, he met with his best friend's wife. She no longer meant anything to him. They had ended their relationship. At home, Joseph unpacked Hannah's favorite soap. He still vividly remembered the scent, which brought back memories. Joseph suffered and occasionally drank. Despite his wounds, on the oil rig, he was genuinely happy when near Hannah. Joseph was in Copenhagen for the first time. He was here to find Hannah. The task was complicated by the fact that he didn't even know what she looked like. But Joseph knew for sure that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with her. An archive worker gave Joseph a film containing information about Hannah. She was one of many war refugees. The archive worker, who had sent letters to Hannah multiple times, advised Joseph to think carefully before viewing the film because it was saturated with hatred and horror. Ironically, Hannah was ashamed of surviving. This shame was much stronger than the pain of what she had experienced. Joseph understood that he shouldn't watch it and returned the film to the archive worker. She said she had a photo of Hannah somewhere. Joseph went to the factory where she worked. After the shift, all the workers left the building. As Hannah was leaving, Joseph called out to her and handed her the backpack. Joseph had always known that she was a blonde. Hannah in turn felt awkward. She had opened her heart to Joseph earlier, but now she didn't know if she had done the right thing. Joseph was truly grateful to her for the help. He also mentioned that the rig had closed down. All the workers were offered jobs in Chile, but Joseph wasn't sure what he would do next. Joseph asked Hannah to go with him. It didn't matter where exactly. Hannah wasn't sure if it was a good idea. She wasn't ready to let someone into her life. As Hannah was about to leave, Joseph said he would do anything for her. In the end, Hannah stayed with him, and they kissed. Next, the events take us some time into the future. Hannah still hadn't fully recovered from her past traumas, but life goes on.